absolute beginners came to Georgetown. They were wearing Harris tweed and pork pie hats. They'd slit your throat and throw you in the gutter. But it's all you can expect from men like that. The bus is bound for Niles Bend and Harbor. The ladies wear perfume to scar your nose, and the only way to reach them is to scare them. But of that you know little, I suppose. It's a magical and mystical performance as you perambulate right down the road, with your pockets full of stardust and perfection, and Jesus on your side and in your soul. She had rings on every finger and 10 bracelets, some touch with powers given by a sage. He had contemplated giving her his wristwatch. The time for him had long since gone its way. Of the city he would shuffle, while spinning on his heels and chewing beef. He had promised her he'd be a vegetarian, but he could not control his lust for meat. Some say she left the streets for greater glory, but others said that she was big with child. Whatever was the truth, it did not matter. He would hunt her down and cut her with his smile. Last time he was seen was by the pawn shop. He traded 2 gold teeth for a sack of corn, and he would plant it on the outskirts of the city as a warning that he would someday return. Said he never found her, he's still looking. It is said he searches rivers for some sign, but the truth is that he caught her down in Georgetown with a Spaniard who had left his wife behind. In the back streets of the city he would shuffle, while spinning on his heels and chewing beef. He had promised her he'd be a vegetarian, but he could not control his lust for meat. Some say she left the streets for greater glory, but others said that she was big with child. Whatever was the truth, it did not matter. He would hunt her down and cut her with his smile. Last time he was seen was by the pawn shop. He traded 2 gold teeth for a sack of corn, and he would plant it on the outskirts of the city as a warning that he would someday return. He said he never found her, he's still looking. It is said he searches rivers for some sign, but the truth is that he caught her down in Georgetown with a Spaniard who had left his wife behind.
Rippin' Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Rippin' Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
Don't you wish that your weekend was longer than just 2 days? Well, if so, then you're in luck, because here on Rippin' Common Sense Radio, our weekend begins on Wednesday. Yes, you heard that right. Our weekend kicks off every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, with Darkwolf's Den, starring yours truly, Jerry the Dark Wolf. But that's where the fun has only just begun. Make sure you come back every Thursday through Sunday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, for the Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show, starring AJ the Rippin' Rabbit. He dives into the archives of vocal legend Art Bell and brings those stories up to date. So make sure that you spend your extended weekends with the animals of radio, Jerry the Dark Wolf and AJ the Rippin' Rabbit, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, every Wednesday through Sunday, right here on Rippin' Common Sense Radio. Hi, I'm Jerry Hicks, host of DarkWolf's Den, right here on Rippin' Common Sense Radio. And I want to talk to you today about an organization that means a lot to me and that I am proud to be a part of. We are called IMEC Incorporated, which stands for the International Mandela Effect Conference. We are a 501c3 organization run by a team of artists, authors, and visionaries who are extremely passionate about both the Mandela Effect phenomenon as well as the community surrounding it. IMEC is united in a mission to inspire, empower, and unify all curious observers. Through evidence presented by scientists, researchers, authors, and spiritual leaders around the world, we aim to educate the community on this incredible reality-changing event known as the Mandela Effect. Our 2020 event will be held online this year, June 20th to 26th, and will be available for absolutely free both on our website at imec.world as well as the International Mandela Effect Conference YouTube page. For more information, please visit imec.world. That is imec.world. IMEC.WORLD. Together we go, together we grow. In modern society, we've gotten really used to having technology right beside us at all times. Our life is almost dependent upon it at this point. But have we ever really stopped to question, where does it come from? We know there's patents, and we know who they say created these things, but where did they get the ideas? Where did they get the materials to create these things? You might be surprised at the answers that come out. All that and more coming up in just a few moments, but first...
Coming to you from a secret mountain cave, hidden deep within the Idaho wilderness. This is the Darkwolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and this is Darkwolf's Den. We appreciate every last one of you tuning in this Wednesday, June 3rd, 2020. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we appreciate you having chose us to be right there with you. Oh, yeah. All right, guys, tonight, I can't help but wonder sometimes how we take what we take for granted so much. like modern technology. Is that not incredibly amazing? Even having the ability to talk to you every week because of the wonders of technology, right? Because of the wonders of radio and the wonders of the internet and the wonders of everything in between. The ability to reach out to you every week with a brand new episode and talk to you about things that really are important to both the paranormal communities and myself. It's incredible, right? But we always assumed it was just human ingenuity that came up with all these leaps in technology. And every now and then through history, we will see giant leaps in technology for what seems to be no reason at all. And that still may be the case that it is human ingenuity, but what if it was actually maybe helped along for the last 80 years anyway from other worlds? That's right. Possible technology that we use every day that could have come from other worlds. How about Kevlar? That was invented in 1965. The integrated circuit, that was invented, or the early concept of anyway, in 1949. Or the laser. In 1960, they built the first laser, and it was huge. Within 3 years, they had it down to the size of a pointer pen. Now that is pretty incredibly large leap in technology there. Or the optical fiber. The first working fiber optic data transmission system was 1965. But to be fair, this had been conceptualized in the 20s and 30s, but they did not actually make it work until 1965. So why is this important? Well, this is actually extremely important because they all happened after the year 1947. And 1947 in the ufology community is a very milestone landmark year. Specifically July 1947. That is when the supposed Roswell incident occurred. And if I may take you real quickly through the incident, it is a dark, stormy night upon the deserts of New Mexico. And there's a lightning storm that is just fiercely raging, which is not odd for that area. And the farmer has been watching his ranch when he hears something come falling out of the sky and crash landing on his ranch. The next day, after the storm, he went to check out what had happened and found material that was very clearly not of anything we had created. Material that you could, metal that is, that you could crinkle up within your own hand. And when you let your hand release, this material would flatten back out to its original shape. Now that is pretty darned incredible. Of course, this got put in the newspaper, and the Army claimed that they had found a flying saucer. And then the very next day, the Army come back and said, "You are all mistaken. This is a weather balloon and nothing more." And they carted off all evidence of anything happening and made all kind of cover stories. And then they started making cover stories over cover stories. And it really became a great big problem. And people never did forget about Roswell. As a matter of fact, it is one of the most well-known alien quote-unquote encounters or alien crashes, otherworldly crashes upon this planet. So, assuming that did happen, and there's a lot of research to beg to agree that it did happen, assuming it did, what happened to the technology? Do you think they just stored it away in a hangar and covered it with a tarp and said, let's not worry about that, forget it, it's nothing? You and I both know that's not the way any government or military works. Military being the operative word here, because they're going to try to back engineer and reverse engineer everything that they can in order to help themselves and their country. Well, what if I told you that's exactly what has happened for the last 80 years? And I'm not the only person to claim this, and I'm not just claiming it, I'm claiming it with proof that I will show you momentarily. The way this all began, the proof that I'm about to show you, the way I ran upon it anyway, is by being a paranormal researcher from a very young age. You see, the age of 12, I was already into paranormal research. And then about the age of 16 or 17, no, I had to be 18, 17 or 18, I received a book from my parents who had got it at a yard sale. A book called The Day After Roswell. And this was an incredibly intriguing book. It was written by a guy named William Burns, and Colonel Philip J. Corso. Philip J. Corso was a very, very important man. Will be the main topic for the first part of this show. He released the book in 1997. I got my copy about 98, so I had to be about 18. It chronicled the life of the colonel, and as we're about to hear, some of the most amazing work that anyone on this planet has been asked to ever do. But before we get to that point, we must lay a little bit of groundwork. See, you can't just come out with claims from anybody. You have to have a little bit of a background about them to really understand what is going on. And what I am about to go over is very important because of all his military activity being well documented, as you will see, with the distinction that he had. This is the last guy that you would expect to put his career on the line or say anything about UFOs. See, after joining the Army in 1942, he served in Army intelligence in Europe, becoming the chief of U.S. counterintelligence in Rome. He was actually in Rome in 47 when the incident occurred. During the Korean War, 1950 to 53, Corso performed intelligent duties under General Douglas MacArthur, as I'm sure many of you have heard the name of, and chief of the Special Projects Branch of the Intelligence Division, Far East Command. One of his primary duties was to keep track of the enemy prisoners of war camps in North Korea. In 1945, Corso arranged for the safe passage of 10,000 Jewish World War II refugees out of Rome to the British Mandate of Palestine. He was the personal emissary to Giovanni Battista Montini at the Vatican, later Pope Paul VI, during the period when the Nazi rat lines were most active. Corso was on the staff of President Eisenhower's National Security Council, working directly within the White House for 4 years. In 1961, he became the chief of the Pentagon's Foreign Technology Desk in Army Research and Development. And this was working on another hero of our story, Lieutenant General Arthur Trudeau. You see, when this all began and he started working for Trudeau, Trudeau made him promise not to say a word, but also told him the moment he was released of his oath was the moment the general died. The general passed away in 1994, and Colonel Corso got his book out by 1997. And he did this in order to give the young people, the next generation, the information that he had, the information that we're about to go over very shortly. But you see, this is where the story takes a really strange twist. So far, I've told you about a man with some very distinguished honors. A man that is far away from the UFO topic as you can get. However, across his military career, especially being in intelligence, he actually had run across many, many UFO reports and reports of strange activities, and had proven himself trustworthy to General Trudeau. A moment ago, I told you about the Roswell incident that occurred, and what we're about to hear now is Philip J. Corso, in his own words, in what he experienced dealing with the aftermath of the Roswell incident, at least the first time he encountered the aftermath of the incident. He would go on to encounter it many, many more times, and we'll discuss here shortly, but this was the first, I believe, as I know of, encounter he had with a Roswell artifact. Take a listen.
So, one night, I was a post-duty officer. Post-duty officer means that I was in control. For that night, I was the one that checked all the guards, checked all security areas. In fact, checked the whole post. I was the duty officer that night. And I went to the veterinarian section, and one of a sergeant I knew very well was sergeant of the guard that night. I told him, Sarge, how's everything around here? And he said, fine, sir. I told him, they told me to be careful to watch this area because you have a sense of something sensitive here. He said, you want to see it, sir? I told him, yeah, let's go look. And I knew this sergeant very, he was a master sergeant. I went back, and there was 5 crates there, like 5 or 6, I think it was 5. I lifted one up, and here's this body there and floating in fluid. And I looked at it about 10, 15 seconds, not much more than that. So I put it back down and I said, Sarge, come on, get out of here now. I don't want to get you in trouble because I'm the duty officer. I can go around, walk around here. but you might get in trouble for coming back. Just come on, let's go. Come out with me. So we went out, and I told him, where did it come from, Sarge? He said, well, 5 trucks coming through here from an airfield in New Mexico, and they're heading for Wright-Patterson Air Force. Now, in those days, there weren't all these big roads now. In those days, Route 40 was about the only cross-country route, and the route that they took was Route 40, going through Fort Riley, Kansas, and then up to Wright-Patterson Air Force. And I said, well, stay away from her, Sergeant. I don't want you to get in any trouble. I told him I can walk around and see it. So, and I started to figure, what was that? First, I thought it was a child, because it was small. Then I looked at this head and all, right away, and this was only happened in a matter of seconds. Then I put the end back down, and the head was different, the arms were spindly, the body it was gray. So right at that moment, I figured, I don't know what this thing is. So like in intelligence business, I just better put it in the back of my head here and wait till maybe in the future I get corroboration so I can evaluate what it is. So I promptly forgot about it.
And of course, in the ufology field, it is a well-known thing that the alien bodies were eventually rounded up in Wright-Patterson, and that's where they're said to have ended up, and never at Area 51 at all.
And I inherited reports, autopsy reports from Walter Reed Hospital. Now, Walter Reed, there was a laboratory there, which was our laboratory, and we financed. That's who did the autopsies for us. But we didn't leave any copies to them. All copies had to come back to us, because after all, it was our lab. We financed it all. So there I started getting indication, proof that a crash really happened here. Of course, then I kept it quiet for 35 years. I had an oath with the general, and I didn't reveal the names of people. Even he criticized me. He said, 35 years you kept a secret, didn't even tell your family. I thought, why should I tell anybody? No, the general told me, he said, Phil, let's keep it secret. When I die, though, I relieve you of my oath. 3 years ago, the general died.
And the actual autopsy video that was supposedly came out to the public that was real apparently was done within the Wright-Patterson laboratory, of course owned by the government, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So if it was true and if it was real, it was government done. How that would have leaked out, goodness only knows, right? We've still got stuff leaking out today like the Tic Tac UFO that everybody talks about, which is absolutely real according to the Navy and the government, which we find that really intriguing.
Well, the nature of the body inside. Because before that, I never knew that. They did an autopsy, and they cut it open, all the brain and all. And the brain was different, and most of the body was different. But no nose, no mouth, no ears, no vocal cords, no digestive system, no sex organs. So then we came to the conclusion that it was a humanoid clone.
And having a clone would definitely be a very efficient style of space travel. Very cheap, too, if you can build your clones over and over and over, right?
And when I came back, General Trudeau pulled me in. He had reorganized research and development from a secondary mission logistics to a very compact, good unit, about 3,000 officers. It wasn't too compact. And then first when I reported in, I was a special assistant. Then he created the Foreign Technology Division about a week later and put me in charge of it.
And this again is some more of that infamous government doublespeak. You see, Foreign Technology Desk of Army R&D. Let's break this down. You would assume first that the Foreign Technology Desk would mean, crashed aircraft from, say, Russia or China, Germany, or fill in the country. However, that is only really half of the definition. They can also mean anything from off-world. That would technically still be classified as foreign. But that's only half the title, remember. He worked at the Foreign Technologies Desk of Army R&D. And we all know what research and development is. But how do they get it from research and development and even alien tech into the general public and the general population? Well, General Corso can tell us all about that. Let's hear what he's got to say.
And we never trusted CIA because in my day, Stalin gave orders to get to this information that came out of Roswell to some of his top scientists and agents. That order went out. And we knew that in the special intelligence that I was in the Pentagon, which is very closely held. KGB trying to penetrate that, but they never did. And we knew that Stalin, they send agents out all over this area here to try to get information on Roswell. And yet we stood back like fools and said it didn't exist. It was a weather balloon. They didn't think it was a weather balloon. Countries in Europe are taking this very serious. They're not like us here. They're not going to put out stories that there were dummies came out of the air or people with big heads. Those people are a little more serious about this than we are. But around here, I'm even surprised to see the reaction from these people. Because somebody like me has never been out like this, and after being in the military, you don't go out and give interviews and write books and things like that. Because when we gave the information out, we gave it out and insisted they take the patents. But also we put a little bit of a requirement on there. Feed it back to us for the competitive edge of the Army. Take the patents, make all the money you want, but give it to the American people and give it to the world. The Japanese, they interviewed me, and I told them when we put the integrated circuit out, we also gave it to you. Discretion better part of valor. We just kept it to ourselves. Only certain people knew about it, head to head, brain to brain, no paper trail. And we were able to accomplish something. Now, discussions with the German scientists, we had discussions. General Trudeau told me one day, it took us 5 years to fully develop a transistor that somebody else started, and the integrated circuit. If we didn't have the help, like Obert says, that we've been helped, and Smith said, the boys upstairs, it would have taken us 250 years.
So let's go ahead and tie this all back together, ladies and gentlemen. So 1947, July, it's a dark and stormy night, and an object crashes on the ground of New Mexico. Before anybody can really get in and see what's happening, amongst a much commotion, the Army steps in and gathers up all that they can gather up. They put all of this into a artifact file, and it ends up in a filing cabinet called the Nut File. The Nut File ends up under the command of General Arthur Trudeau, who passes this on to Colonel Corso, who is under his command. Colonel Corso had a very, very interesting job, and this is where the sneakiness of the whole project comes into play. Colonel Corso would take these artifacts to companies that were working on things that were somewhat like what they already thought the artifact would do. These companies, of course, would be under government grant. The deal that was made with them was they would reverse engineer the product. Once they figured out what the product did, they would give it back to the Army and military first. After that, they were free to take the patent themselves and make as much money as they would like, which is really sneaky when you think about it, because if you look on Wikipedia today, it says such and such created this, or this person created that, but when we really look and see who really created it, what was the original origin? They got the patent, but how did they come across the actual information? Of course, we're not privy to most of this information. It's only thanks to Colonel Corso and his work and his honest admittance of this after the general's death and his oath being broken now that he can talk about all of this, or he could at the time. And I, of course, when I read this book in 98, read it with just a hair of skepticism. Okay, a lot of skepticism. One piece of hardware, though, that mentioned in the book by Colonel Corso was a headband that they could not figure out exactly how to reverse engineer. It was claimed to be found on one of the bodies around the crashed vehicle. This body was said to be wearing the headband, and they assumed that it was for the pilot to pilot the ship through thoughts and brainwaves. But again, they could never exactly figure out how to reverse engineer it. And I know a lot of this sounds extremely hard to believe, but I can tell you in our lifetime, we have seen one of these pieces of tech come out. Introducing the Star Wars Force Trainer. In 2009, this toy hit the market, followed by a second version and even one called a Mind Flex. Here's a description of the, quote, game, if I may. The Force Trainer is a device that reads brain activity like an EEG and allows the user to control a floating ball by concentrating, end quote. Now, if that isn't blatant admission, then I don't know what is. Either Colonel Corso was psychic or he was telling the truth. I prefer to believe the latter. Now you can actually pick up EEG readers with no issue. These are headbands that you put on your head and it will read the brain waves that are going on and exiting the body at any given time, because we are always putting off brain waves and brain energy. But now I think I have, at least in this first part of the program, presented quite the case for the idea that a lot of the stuff we use, or at least the basics of it, if not much more than that we know about, now, but even the integrated chip that's in all of our phones, everything we use today comes from technology that actually began on other worlds, and the government was nice enough, if you will, to let us have. But has this ended? Is this the end of the programs and projects like that?
Wooler Smith is really the man that first put in my mind when nuclear binding coming apart on things. And he was a magnetic, really, he was a genius, and the Canadian government really treated him bad. And then I was supposed to go to his laboratory visiting because the general told me when it was on. The general told him, Smith, he said, you and the colonel have a lot to talk about. I'll let the colonel come up and visit you at your lab on Mayber on Lake Ontario. Well, I put it off. In 1962, I decided to go up. I called up, and they told me Mr. Smith died of cancer, and I never really got to go to his laboratory. But he gave us a piece of metal that he took from a flying saucer.
You exchanged, didn't you?
We exchanged, and he brought ours back later.
And earlier, of course, I mentioned sudden leaps in technology that have happened throughout the centuries. And there's been another interesting phenomenon noted by a lot of researchers that I've heard about lately again, actually. And it's this idea that the saucers suddenly get here. There's 2 or 3 of them in a group, and one of them all of a sudden acts like it's gotten into trouble. It'll falter and wobble and wibble, and then all of a sudden, this piece of metal will come flying at the bottom of it, and it'll be okay, and the other 2 will come, and they'll all take off together. It's almost like they're seeding or dropping technology accidentally on purpose on the planet for us to slowly figure out and reverse engineer and figure out how to do things with it. Like the different metals like the Colonel spoke about, there's also ideas and thoughts that the TTSA, To the Stars Academy, as well as Robert Bigelow, have gotten their hands on some metals that were far out, if you will, or not from this planet. And it only makes you wonder in aerospace what kind of breakthroughs we're about to make. And I have went on record a couple times before, but I'm going to go on public record right now. And I said this last year, so I'm going to go with 4 years this time. I predict this based only on assumptions, that within 4 years, since we've now got the Space Force, we're suddenly going to have anti-gravity figured out. And it'll be a wonderful thing, and it'll be just in time for the Space Force to happen. And we'll just be able to get out there far enough to defend ourselves and all these wonderful things, because it's my opinion that we've actually had anti-gravity, and I say we as our government has actually had the ability to do anti-gravity since the 1950s. That is only my assumption based on reporting that used to occur in the 1950s that no longer does occur. Those stories disappeared very quickly after the 1950s. But I hope you guys have enjoyed the show so far. It is coming up on, as you guys know, the first half of the show. So we're coming up on a hard network break. I hope to see everybody back on the other side, where we're going to talk about yet another guy who come out and blew the whistle about what's really going on in the government. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Dark Wolf, and I'll be right back with you guys right here on Darkwolf's Den right after these messages. Oh, yeah!
Hi guys, it's AJ, the Rippin' Rabbit. If you've enjoyed the program so far, please make sure that you thumb up that video and hit that subscribe bell with notifications. I'll be back again tomorrow, Thursday night, for a look at Superstition. That's Thursday, June 4th, 2020, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Very superstitious writings on the wall. Do you have a secret superstition? We're going to find out all about it tomorrow night, Thursday. Then Friday, Join us for co-host Moneybag 73, Mandela Monthly. That's right, it's June. So we'll be doing our monthly installment of the Mandela Monthly. Happens the first weekend in every month here at the Rip'n Rabbit Hole. And Friday, June 5th, is no exception. That's Friday, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. All shows start at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Then Saturday night, we'll dive through the world and the power of influence, how to harness the power of influence and defend against social influencers' tactics. That's Saturday, June 6th. And then we'll end out the weekend together Sunday night with our family fantastic fun show game night, Sunday, June 7th. Again, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Will Earth Daughter remain seated on the fantastic Fun King Queen throne? Tune in Sunday night. Participate. Maybe you'll be the one to knock her off. If you haven't done so already, please make sure to jump on over to the Rip'n Rabbit Hole and hop on our mailing list. That's RIPON, rabbithole.com. Now, I've noticed, and I've gotten some feedback, that some people say that the emails are going to the spam folder. So would you do me a favor, if you know that you're on our mailing list already, could you please check your junk or spam mail folder and let me know if yours was filtered in that direction? I have no idea why that happens. There's a lot of fun and a great community hanging out over there at the ripnrabbithole.com. You can join in the fun, and the conversation will continue after the show in the VIP Backstage Lounge. That's a virtual meetup spot, a place where you can designate your camera and your microphone and hang out in a backstage lounge after the show, where the conversation continues at the ripnrabbithole.com. It's a lot of fun. Lots of interesting people from all over the world hang out there. We'll be back to Jerry and the Darkwolf's Den Show with paranormal technology in just a moment. Here on the very best of Common Sense Radio, the Rip'n Rabbit Hole.
Are you a YouTube creator that's tired of fighting over copyright issues for using the wrong music in your videos? Or perhaps a songwriter looking for something new? I know when I started Darkwolf's Den, I needed some original music. And for me, the answer was a no-brainer. I immediately called Tom Baillies of Red Shed Studios. Tom has been in the music industry for over 20 years and has a true passion for the art. So if you need a custom soundtrack for your next project, make sure you contact Tom Baillies at Red Shed Studios at 920-344-7634. That's 920-344-7634. Red Shed Studios. That's right, everybody. It is part 2 of Darkwolf's Den. How is everybody enjoying the show so far? I know I really am. That story in the first half is one of my absolute favorite stories. I had the book as a child, as a teenager, and the fact that it's been verified through so many sources is just absolutely incredible. And the man's reputation and background has been completely verified through his entire military record. You can still look the documentation up to this day. But what happens when you're a person that the government wants to make disappear, wants to discredit and pretend that they do not exist anymore? A person that would work at a top secret military base that they don't even want to admit exists. This person right here would have a very dangerous path ahead of them. So the best thing they could do, of course, would be to speak openly and publicly and get their story out, especially if their story involved something out of this world. It's exactly what happened in 1989 in Las Vegas. A man named George Knapp, a journalist and radio personality you guys may have heard of before, had a story that he was working on, and the person that he was was supposed to interview dipped out on him. So he made a call to his friend John Lear and asked him if he knew anyone. John Lear happened to know a guy that worked at a top-secret military facility and had no problem giving George this information. They got the person to agree to come and meet at John Lear's house and do an interview with George Knapp for the news. Under the conditions, it would be anonymous and the identity would be hidden under the name Dennis. This would turn out to be not only the most important interview in all of ufology, but the most important interview that Mr. Knapp would do in his entire career, and an interview that to this day is still one of the most famous and important interviews to ever be done, in my opinion. And I actually have the clip of the original interview that aired in 1989. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Dennis talking about what he's blowing the whistle on with the government top-secret facility. Take a listen.
There's really no way I can prove it without revealing my identity and getting myself into more trouble than I have already.
Exactly what's going on up there?
Well, there's several, actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs, that are out there of extraterrestrial origin, and they're basically being dismantled. Some are, well, in various stages of completion, built from other parts, and they're being test flown and basically just analyzed.
In 1989, for someone to come out, say they worked for the government and that they're testing flying saucers was almost unheard of, and that's what made it so incredible and such an intriguing and amazing story. This is the story that was heard around the world. They even played parts of it in Japan. It was absolutely amazing. All around the world, people heard that the government was working on UFOs, but that would only be the very beginning. Mr. Dennis would go on to do some more interviews with Mr. Knapp, but to understand why he went public, you have to have just a little bit more backstory. You see, in March, he had went to Tickaboo Peak, just over Area 51, on a Wednesday night, and taken John Lear and a couple other of his friends in a mobile home, and he had told them this is when they test the UFOs, and lo and behold, there they were on that Wednesday night. So the next Wednesday, they went back to try again, and lo and behold, they caught video evidence this time of UFOs over Area 51. The third time, they decided to go out and just party it up. They got a little bit too comfortable, and that's when they got caught. They got caught by the guys at Area 51, detained, and then was talked to and arrested by the police of Lincoln County. And this is where things got a little dicey for Mr. Dennis, so he decided he would go public with his story, basically as an insurance policy. But then he would later on come out with his real name.
Despite numerous inquiries and feelers, Dennis has remained anonymous until now. His real name is Robert Lazar, a young scientist with eclectic interests. The choice of Dennis was an inside joke. He says that's the name of his superior at Groom Lake. It wasn't a joke to Dennis.
He called right after and he said, "Do you have any idea what we're going to do to you now?" And I said, "Well, no." And he hung up the phone.
Lazar's story is, by any standards, fantastic. He says he's telling it in order to protect himself.
And what a story it is, and we'll hear that in just a moment. But you remember in the first half we discussed with Colonel Corso the reverse engineering of all these small artifacts and figuring out what they did and back engineering them. But what do you think they did with the main craft, the power source, the shell, the engine, the propulsion systems? What do you think they did with all that? You think they just stored that away in a warehouse with the tarp on it? Really? I don't think so. No. What we're about to hear is what continued after General Corso left, what continued with the larger pieces that were left after Roswell.
When was I hired at S4? I guess early '89, and I was probably there only about 6 months or so. on a very infrequent basis.
And this is yet another part of Bob's story that would go on to be verified without any issue. You see, nobody had ever heard of S4 at the time. They'd only ever heard of Area 51. So everybody thought he was lying because they thought S4 wasn't a real place. It would later go on to be proven that it is.
How were you transported to and from work?
At the time that I was working there at McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas, there was a Special Projects EG&G building. When I was told to go to work, I drove there, parked my car there, and got in a plane at the airport, flew to Groom Lake, where I deplaned and waited for a bus, and the bus drove me down to S4.
And again, later workers and whistleblowers from Area 51 would verify that some workers did get on a bus and go to a different location when they got off of the Janet Airlines that they caught every day out of Las Vegas into Groom Lake.
The S4 facility is an area just off the Papoose lake bed, dry lake bed. And it consists of 9 hangars. The hangars have sloped doors on them with a sand texture coating. Around the opposite end of the hangars, there's the standard entrance where you're dropped off at, go through a security check, and inside there's a small complex. There is some office space, there's several laboratories, the hangars themselves, of course, and a few other places. I didn't have free reign to go wherever I wanted to. Everywhere I went to, I was essentially escorted, so that was really all about that I saw.
Inside the facility, what was the basic layout? Were there underground levels?
I don't think there were any underground levels to it, though there could have been. I don't think it was an extensive underground facility. It just looked like an installation that was butt up against a mountain. And, I didn't see any evidence of any stairs going down, elevators, or, but like I said, I don't know. There could have been, and I just might not have been permitted in those areas.
Killed in the project. What exactly happened there?
Allegedly, obviously, I didn't see this, and I don't know it to be fact, but this is what I was told, that I was hired to replace one of a couple people that were killed while working on one of the reactors from one of the crafts. Apparently, they, for whatever reason, cut open an operating reactor, and the device exploded, killing both of them. The scientists that were killed there, allegedly the detonation from the explosion was fairly large. It would have rivaled a small tactical nuke. So it was done at the Nevada test site, and it was to be passed off as an unannounced nuclear test.
Did you have any direct contact or communication with aliens?
No, not at all.
Tell us about the briefing files. Under what conditions did you gain access to them?
I was put into the briefing room with 121 or 22 briefings and really was just told to sit and read through them. I think they were there just to mainly educate me on what was going on. They weren't a complete in-depth explanation on everything else, but just essentially a brief synopsis on some of the other projects that were going on there. Supposedly, the information, now this isn't something that I determined, it's something I was told, that the crafts originated from a planet that orbited the Zeta Reticuli star system. Zeta Reticuli 1 and Zeta Reticuli 2 are two stars of a binary star system. The craft allegedly came from there.
And interestingly enough, Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 come up in an absolutely enormous amount of abduction case files of the Greys and Little Greys. So that is also a very intriguing little piece of the puzzle.
1 or 2 autopsy photographs I saw dealt with just a small photograph, a bust shot essentially, just head, shoulders, and chest of an alien where the chest was cut open in T fashion and one single organ was removed. The organ itself in the other picture was cut and vivisectioned essentially, showing the different chambers in there. This was totally unrelated to anything I was doing, but from that photograph it looked like what you see in UFO lore as the typical gray. So how tall it was from what I could see, I couldn't tell because I only saw a portion of the photograph. But if everything else you see is correct, I would imagine it was 3.5 or 4 feet tall. But there again, all I had to see was a photograph, and I didn't have much to go on.
And if you guys remember, Colonel Corso described seeing pretty much the exact same creature at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base while he was doing his rounds that evening.
What was your job description at S4?
My official job description was a senior staff physicist. I don't know if I actually had that position when I was there, because I was there so infrequently. I wasn't supervising anyone, so that was the official position I was hired under. But whether or not I actually acted in that capacity, I don't know.
What was the size of the staff working on Project Galileo?
Well, there were 22 people employed there totally.
And that was specifically for the Galileo project?
No, for the entire project.
Oh, I see.
There were 22 people with majestic clearance. I had majestic clearance. Majestic clearance was designated as clearance 38 levels above Q clearance, and Q clearance is the civilian top secret clearance.
When did you see your first disc?
The first disc I saw, I believe it was the second, or I think it was the third time I was up there. Normally the bus pulled around to the opposite end of the facility, which was the main entrance, and that's where we went in. On this particular occasion, it pulled up to one of the hangar doors, which were normally closed, and the last one was open. We came out, and I saw the disc in the hangar. Upon seeing it, it struck me that, well, this explains all the UFO sightings. Not thinking that it was an extraterrestrial craft, that this must have been some advanced form of fighter that we've been working on for years, and, people have just caught it being tested, so on and so forth. And it never even occurred to me, even though I was looking at an extraterrestrial vehicle, that, this wasn't man-made.
When did you realize the craft was not of earthly origin?
Well, it probably really hit me when I got inside the craft and looked around and began to understand how the craft was operated, and finally grasped the whole project as a whole, as what we were doing, the fact that we weren't building this thing, we were trying to find out how it was made. We were back engineering it.
And as promised, we have come back around full circle. They are back engineering or reverse engineering these craft that came down. And there was more than one that crash landed, actually. Roswell just happens to be the most famous. But they were reverse engineering these craft to try to figure out how they work so that they could build their own. And I believe that they may have actually accomplished that, but that's a whole nother story for a whole nother time. Let's hear what else Bob has to say about reverse engineering of alien craft.
What is back engineering?
Well, back engineering is taking a finished product and finding out how the device or product was produced, and essentially determining whether or not you can duplicate it.
Which sounds oddly familiar, kind of like the Foreign Technologies Desk of the Research and Development Department. Remember that one? Well, the one that Colonel Corso used to work for? They used to have the job of back engineering alien technology. It sounds like in the 80s, it moved on up into a more secret and privative facility called S4 out of Area 51.
Lift.
It produces a gravity wave, which is similar to the gravity wave that the Earth produces. However, the craft phase shifts the wave. In other words, it turns the wave not really in an opposite polarity, but something to that effect, where it will work against the natural gravity wave of the Earth, and it produces lift in that effect.
Is there any internal protection for the crew? Does the craft generate a gravitational field inside the craft itself?
Well, the craft generates its own gravitational field. Being inside that field essentially doesn't shield you, but essentially you're in and this is a terrible way to say it, almost in a different realm, because you're now influenced only by that gravitational field. For instance, people wonder how a craft like this can make a turn at such high speed, a 90-degree turn, when they would imagine people slamming up against the wall or something to that effect. Well, that really wouldn't happen. Inertia would have no effect. You're in a distortion. And don't forget that gravity distorts time and space, so really nothing is going to influence you while you're in there.
Describe the gravity amplifiers for us and some of their different operating configurations.
There are 3 amplifiers. The craft can operate on a single one, can lift off the ground. The way in which it's propelled are 2 different ways. There's what they call Omicron configuration, where the craft is using one generator, or Delta configuration, where it's utilizing all 3. Delta configuration would be for space travel. Essentially, the craft will tilt up on its side, as opposed to a science fiction movie where you see a flying saucer moving around. The craft will tilt up on its side, focus the 3 gravity generators to a single point, and move through space that way. Moving around the source of gravity is a problem to a disk because it's interference, essentially. So what they do is they work with that interference to their benefit. They'll use one gravity generator to lift the craft off the ground. And as opposed to what we're used to, for instance, a plane, once it's in the air, we envision thrust or some force coming out the back of it to push it forward. The crafts work completely opposite of that. What they do is once they're hovering in the air, they'll swing the 2 remaining gravity generators up in front of them and create a distortion, essentially a downhill, and the craft rolls downhill for infinity. It's always chasing a little distortion. That's why they look goofy when they fly around at low speed, because they're essentially, and any time you run over, the gravity field around the Earth is not completely constant and stable, depending on the minerals and density of the Earth underneath it. The gravity will vary somewhat, and you will get odd movements of the craft. So its low-speed mode is kind of unstable for the most part.
And I'm going to interject here with just a couple points real quick. Number one, the way he described that engine running and the way it works is a lot of like the idea that we're looking at now as a way to warp space around an object and kind of fall into it. That way you could actually move very much faster than the speed of light, exactly like he was describing. Also, what he's talking about, the gravity being in a different formation across all of the land and all of the earth, that is also absolutely 100% correct. The gravity is not continuous and exactly the same all around the earth. It does have various waves and gaps, just as the land itself does. As you would imagine, the gravity would follow the landscape. Up on a hill or up on a mountain would be a different gravity than at the bottom of the mountain. We're getting close to the bottom of the hour here, so before we go, I want to cover one more thing that really set Bob Lazar's story into truth for me. Again, as I say all the time, I come at all stories with a grain of salt. And when I first heard this one, as most of the UFO community did, we at first came at it with a grain of salt, especially when there was an issue with getting his records from schools that he said to have attended. The problem is they literally made this man disappear and got rid of his entire record, but how did he know what was going on at Area 51 if he wasn't truly out there working with them and for them? Also, why would they hire somebody with absolutely no college education whatsoever? That doesn't make sense either. So yes, I truly believe his story, and I truly believe the government covered up everything to do with him in order to discredit him. But he claimed that there was a special way that these craft worked, a special element by which these could produce energy. And when he made this claim, remember, this is 1989.
What is element 115? Is it found here on Earth, or is it strictly an extraterrestrial material?
115 is strictly an extraterrestrial material. It probably occurs naturally in some other places, maybe other star systems. some people not familiar with science or chemistry say, well, that's ridiculous. All the elements occur on Earth, but that's not true. There are elements on the periodic chart that aren't found on Earth. I believe the Heavy Ion Research Lab in Darmstadt, Germany, has reached element 112 recently. So 115 isn't that far away. And when they synthesize it, it's not like they're making a couple ounces of it. They're talking about 1 or 2 atoms of it. To make any usable quantity of a heavy element like that is virtually impossible. Element 115 is in the top of the reactor, and the base of the reactor apparently is a small, something similar to a cyclotron. It's a particle accelerator.
Which is another interesting point that he should hit on, because one thing that I left out of part 1 is another piece of technology that Colonel Corso said was come from the nut file, and that was particle accelerators. So Bob Lazar independently, before this book was ever written, before Corso ever came out, has independently verified what has been said.
A particle is accelerated to high speed and then deflected up a small tube, and it's aimed at the 115. This transmutes the 115, similar to the way we do that in a normal particle accelerator. This causes a reaction, a radiation emission that we really haven't seen before. It produces antimatter. This antimatter is guided down a tuned tube and reacts with a gas. When matter and antimatter react, they convert to 100% energy. This energy is converted, heat energy, is converted to electrical power in the reactor itself. This is done through a thermoelectric converter. And this electrical power is used to power other subsystems on the craft, though there is no wiring, as we would know it. Also, that's almost a byproduct of the reactor. The reactor also sets up a gravitational wave from the 115 being bombarded. This gravitational wave was present at the top of the reactor and is essentially guided in the same way microwaves are guided, through tuned tubes. And this goes to their amplifying cavities and through the projectors that are in the bottom of the craft.
With the gravity generators running, is there thermal radiation danger to the crew?
There is no thermal radiation while the reactor is running. The thermionic generator is 100% efficient, which is in violation of the first law of thermodynamics. But in fact, it works. Element 115 is stable. And for those familiar with chemistry, we know that elements with higher atomic numbers have shorter and shorter half-lives. However, when you reach a certain point, they call it the island of stability. There is a place, and we've theorized this for a long time. Somewhere around 114 to 116, there should be an area in there where the nucleus of the atom is geometrically stable with protons and neutrons, where it no longer decays. It's not radioactive. 115 is, in fact, this element. In fact, it does occur again somewhere around element 247. Of course, we're nowhere near synthesizing that. We can only, predict things like that. But that's where 115 is.
Did the aliens, give us element 115 in large quantities?
Whether or not it was given to us, I can't answer that question. However, I was told that we have 500 pounds by one of my coworkers. How it was obtained and where exactly it came from, I don't know. Whether it came in one of the crafts or it was separate cargo somewhere. Anyone can speculate, but I was told that was the figure.
You were able to get away with a sample of element 115. How much did you get away with?
No comment.
And the only answer we've ever got out of Bob about how much element 115 he actually got out has always been no comment. But there's a funny little twist in the story, guys. Check this out. So element 115, as you heard, is an alien element. It's foreign. It's not of this earth. It's not natural of this earth. It's an alien element that only an alien would have, right? Well, in 2015, there was a new addition to the periodic table of elements. They added nihonium, element 113, Tennessean, element 117, organesson, element 118, and moscovium, also known as unpentium, element 115. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, on your periodic chart right now, element 115, the element that the government discredited and said was absolutely fake, even though they came after Bob and raided his house multiple times and everything else to try to find it. The one that they swore was just conspiracy theory nut job garbage, ladies and gentlemen, is added to the periodic table of elements, and it actually has a listing on Wikipedia as an unknown element, because as far as what side of the chart it goes on, they're not sure exactly how to classify it. So yeah, it's very, very strange there. But the moscovium, element 115, that was for years just, conspiracy theory, like I said a moment ago, is all of a sudden accepted science. And this is, once again, I cannot pound this in enough. My first episode, I brought up how science is wrong more often than it's right, and claims to be right all the time. And in every show, I've shown you that science has either had to backtrack things it said, or has to admit things that it doesn't like to admit. And that trend will only carry on. So, thank you guys for listening tonight. I very much appreciate it. We are getting toward the end of the program. Final thoughts tonight, ladies and gentlemen. The next time that you use the laser pointer to play with your cat, or the next time that you turn your computer on, or even the next time you pick up your phone, understand that you're holding in your hand technology that actually began on an alien planet, and all we did was reverse engineer to make it our own. And that is tonight's final thoughts. Now for something incredibly exciting coming up, guys. Check this out. We have a couple announcements. Number one, June 17th, we will be on the Kingdom of Nye radio show with Heather Wade, and we are very excited about that. Cannot wait to get over there and have a chat with her on the radio and talk some paranormal talk. We're going to discuss theories and paranormal and just have a really great old time over there. And I hope all of you are able to get over there and join us. If you haven't already, please go check her out. Also, June 20th to the 26th, if you haven't heard already, we have the International Mandela Effect Conference. We cannot wait to have everybody there. It will be live, free, online at imec.world, imec.world, as well as the International Mandela Effect YouTube page. Speaking of pages, guys, the best page in the world is the rippinrabbithole.com. That's right, over there we have all kinds of neat, fun stuff. We've got the record button down at the bottom, guys. You want to send us an on-air shout-out, please hit that record button. We would love to hear from you. Send us a shout out. We will play it on the air. All you got to do is go to the bottom of the page, hit the red record button. You can record 30 seconds of audio that it will automatically ship right back here to us in the studio, and we'll get it on the air for you. Also, ladies and gentlemen, if you like the show and you want to be a part of the rabbits over there in the groups and the rabbit holes, come on and delve down with us, ladies and gentlemen, into the Darkwolf's Den Show rabbit hole on rippinrabbithole.com. That's right. That is our groups section, actually. We have the Darkwolf's Den Show group, and we also have the Darkwolf's Den Show Topics Suggestions group. So if you've got things you would like to hear us talk about, or topics you think we'd be interested in, please go ahead and go over there and drop us a line. We would absolutely love to hear from you. That's right. Also, I'm going to go over, guys, to my favorite place, and that is the 24/7 Backstage Lounge. That's where I'm about to go right now. I'm going to go hang out with all my favorite rabbits over there, because the conversation might be done here, but for the rabbits, oh no, the conversation has only just begun. That's right. Go on over to that rippinrabbithole.com once again. Go over to the 24/7 Backstage Lounge. If you scroll about halfway down the page, you're going to find the Cam Chat Lounge. Go ahead and click the Enter Now button there if you'd like, and there you're going to find the where we like to hang out, guys. It will say that you need to click on the camera camera and microphone okay, and that's quite okay, because the moment you get in, you can turn them both off, and you can sit and text chat all you would like. We would love to just have you there and hear what you've got to say and hear your opinion, because everybody's opinion is important. The den might be closing, but don't you worry, guys. The weekend fun has only just begun. Come on back Thursday through Sunday, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, for the Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show. That's right, our buddy AJ the Rippin' Rabbit takes to the airwaves Thursday through Sunday of every week, and he discusses all kinds of amazing and fun, incredibly enjoyable topics. He likes to go to the Art Bell archives and bring up those topics that Mr. Art Bell himself used to love to talk about, and bring those up to date. Also, this week's going to be a little different. This is one of the most fun weeks to be over there. If you've never went to the Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show before, guys, this is the week to do it. I happen to know that on Friday, June 5th, 2020, is Mandela Monthly. That's right. Moneybag 76 joins AJ the Rippin' Rabbit for a discussion about Mandela effects having to do with transportation. That's right. Do you know anything about Mandela effects or things that have changed within the transportation realm? Come on over and pop in and let us know what you found. June 5th, 2020. That's right, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Then, June 7th, 2020, also 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Come on back for the most fun you could ever have on radio. That's right, it is the Fantastic Fun Show, a very fun interactive game show that has a queen or king that is announced at the end that stays the king or queen for the entire month. That's right. I was the first Fantastic Fun King over there, and I'm proud to say that. This time around, Earth Daughter holds that crown. That's right. So if you want to try to get the crown from her, try to challenge her, come on over Sunday, June 7th, 2020, to the Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show. Again with our buddy AJ the Rippin' Rabbit. All shows start 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, right here on Rippin' Common Sense Radio. So whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. This has been DarkWolf's Den. Make sure you come back next week for an all-new episode right here on Rippin' Common Sense Radio. And remember always, stay awake, but dare to dream. Oh, yeah!
Hi guys, it's AJ the Rippin' Rabbit. If you enjoyed the Darkwolf's Den show tonight, please make sure to thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell with notifications. I'll be back again tomorrow, Thursday night, for a look at Superstition. That's Thursday, June 4th, 2020, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Very superstitious writings on the wall. Do you have a secret superstition? We're going to find out all about it tomorrow night, Thursday. Then Friday, join us for co-host Moneybag 73, Mandela Monthly. That's right, it's June. So we'll be doing our monthly installment of the Mandela Monthly. Happens the first weekend in every month here at the Rippin' Rabbit Hole. And Friday, June 5th, is no exception. That's Friday, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. All shows start at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Then Saturday night, we'll dive through the world and the power of influence, how to harness the power of influence and defend against social influencers' tactics. That's Saturday, June 6th. And then we'll end out the weekend together Sunday night with our family fantastic fun show game night, Sunday, June 7th. Again, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Will Earth Daughter remain seated on the Fantastic Fun King Queen throne? Tune in Sunday night. Participate. Maybe you'll be the one to knock her off. If you haven't done so already, please make sure to jump on over to the Ripon Rabbit Hole and hop on our mailing list. That's RIPON, rabbithole.com. Now, I've noticed, and I've gotten some feedback, that some people say that the emails are going to the spam folder. So would you do me a favor, if you know that you're on our mailing list already, could you please check your junk or spam mail folder and let me know if yours was filtered in that direction? I have no idea why that happens. There's a lot of fun and a great community hanging out over there at the riponrabbithole.com. You can join in the fun, and the conversation will continue after the show in the VIP Backstage Lounge. That's a virtual meetup spot. A place where you can designate your camera and your microphone and hang out in a backstage lounge after the show, where the conversation continues at the riponrabbithole.com. It's a lot of fun. Lots of interesting people from all over the world hang out there. I'm going to head on over there and jump in the VIP lounge myself. We'll see you again tomorrow night here on the very best Common Sense Radio, the Ripon Rabbit Hole. Activated, okay, because you're working on a limited time frame here. The REM stage of sleep is not